Today, we're diving into a story that's about 2,000 years old, but we're going to look at it through a really fascinating modern lens. We're going to see how the simple interactions in one chapter of an ancient book can actually teach us some powerful stuff about human connection. So here's the big question we're tackling. What can a story from so long ago, from the Gospel of Luke, actually show us about how we connect or, feel to connect with each other right now today? It's a pretty cool thought. So let's get into it. Here's a quick roadmap for where we're headed. We'll start with this new lens I mentioned. Then we'll apply it to three big moments in the story: a fisherman's crisis, some incredible healings, and a major conflict with the religious leaders. And we'll wrap it all up with the powerful invitation that comes out of all that drama. Okay, so first things first, we need to talk about this framework. To really get what's happening between the people in this story, we need a special tool, a new way of seeing all the conversations and the conflicts. And that tool is called nonviolent communication, or NVC. Now, the main idea behind NVC is actually super simple, but it's also really profound. Instead of getting stuck on judgments on who's right and who's wrong, NVC asks us to look deeper, to see the universal human needs and feelings that are driving everything we say and do. NVC gives us 4 simple steps to do this. First, just observe what actually happened. No judgment. Second, how did that make you feel? Third, and this is the big one, what unmet need is tied to that feeling? And finally, fourth, what could you ask for to help meet that need? We're going to use this exact model to break down the story. All right, let's put this NVC framework to the test with our first case study, a fisherman named Simon Peter. We're going to try to figure out what's really going on beneath the surface for this guy. So the story kicks off with Jesus telling Simon, who's a professional fisherman, mind you, to go back out and try again after a totally miserable night. Simon's response here? It's a pure NVC-style observation. He's not complaining, he's not judging, he's just stating a fact. You can almost hear the exhaustion in his voice. And this number says it all. 0. A whole night of backbreaking work for absolutely nothing. You can feel the frustration and the failure wrapped up in that one number. But then, Simon listens to Jesus, and this happens. It's the complete opposite of what he expected. A catch so huge, it's literally breaking their nets and about to sink their boats. The switch from total emptiness to chaotic abundance is just staggering. Now check out Simon Peter's reaction. It's not, wow, thanks for all the fish. It's something way, way deeper. He doesn't just see a miracle, he sees himself in a new light, and he's totally overwhelmed by this sudden feeling of being completely unworthy. So let's put our NVC lens on this. His feelings are pretty obvious: astonishment, awe, unworthiness. But what are the needs underneath all that? See, this miracle wasn't just about meeting a need for fish. It touched on these much deeper human needs we all have. A need for meaning, for purpose, to be accepted, and to feel like we're contributing to something bigger. His sinful man comment is really a cry from these deep, unmet needs suddenly coming to the surface. Okay, on to our second case study. Here we see 2 really powerful examples of what happens when people are crystal clear about communicating their needs and how that leads to compassionate action. Just listen to this request from the man with leprosy. In NVC terms, it is basically perfect. He observes his condition. He clearly states his need to be clean, which means more than just physical healing. It means being welcomed back into society. And then he makes a request that completely respects Jesus' freedom to choose, if you are willing. And Jesus' response is just as direct, just as clear. He picks up on that word willing and meets it head on. I am willing. Then he meets the need. Be clean. It's this beautiful, powerful exchange. A need is stated clearly, and it's met directly. No games, just connection. So the takeaway here is that this chapter is just full of people who are desperate to have their needs met. The man with leprosy uses his words. But then, a little later, you have the friends of a paralyzed man who use radical action. They literally dig through someone's roof to get their friend help. They are showing, not just telling, their desperate need to see their friend be made whole. Now, let's switch gears and look at the conflict that's brewing in this story. This is where using that NVC lens is going to be incredibly helpful for us to understand the clash between Jesus and the religious leaders. So when Jesus tells the paralyzed man his sins are forgiven, the Pharisees immediately jump to a judgment.
blasphemy. But hold on. With our NBC perspective, we can look past that accusation. What's the unmet need driving their anger? It's a profound need for sacred order and reverence. Their entire world is built on these traditions, and Jesus' actions are threatening their deep-seated need for stability.
And the conflict just keeps growing. Later, Jesus has dinner with a tax collector, a total social outcast. And again, the Pharisees lead with a judgment, this time disguised as a question. They are basically shaming him for who he chooses to hang out with. This moment just perfectly sums up their entire worldview. Their judgment is righteous people should not mix with unrighteous people. But what's the unmet need behind that? It's a need for piety, for purity. They have a deep need for their community to be a reflection of holiness. So Jesus sitting down and sharing a meal with these sinners is a direct challenge to that core need. So how does Jesus respond to all this judgment? Well, this last part shows he doesn't fight their judgments head on. Instead, he points to an even deeper truth. He completely reframes the conflict by focusing on a totally different set of needs. Instead of getting defensive, Jesus just reframes the whole situation. He shifts the focus away from their need for purity and separation and onto the need for healing and inclusion. He's basically saying, you're focused on keeping things pure, but my whole purpose is to connect with those who are in the greatest need. It's a fundamentally different set of priorities. And then he uses this great metaphor. The new wine is this radical new way of relating to people, one that's all about connection and meeting needs. And the old wineskins? Well, that's their rigid system of judgment and separation. He's saying you can't pour this new, expansive way of living into those old, inflexible containers. The whole thing will just burst. It requires a new mindset. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, using a tool like NVC helps us see that behind almost any judgment, whether it's our own or someone else's, there's a universal human need hiding underneath. The story of Luke 5 becomes this incredible example of choosing to meet needs for purpose, healing, and belonging, instead of just following rules that create separation. And understanding those needs, that's the first step to bridging even the widest divides. And that brings us to a final question for you to think about. In your own life, at work, at home, whose actions or words are you just writing off as a harsh judgment? What if, underneath all of that, there's just a deep, unmet need that's crying out for attention? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.